I'm joined today by Jay Kidd, who is the founder and creative director of Wraith Games, and we're going to be talking about Collapsus, which is a game we saw at this year's PAX East. Jay, thank you for taking a little bit of time to talk to us about this game and about your history as a indie dev.
Anytime, glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So let's start. For people that haven't seen or heard of Collapsus, why don't you give them a pitch for it? What is it, and why should they be interested?
So I absolutely love giving the pitch for Collapsus. We wrote down a big master document on Google Drive, and we do about 15 events a year. So I passed that around to every team member, and it was started as something just originally off the top of my head. So let's see if I can do this event style. Collapsus is a block-crunching puzzle game like nothing you've ever played before. In addition to the 3 standard difficulties in both timed and untimed, there's also 25 challenge modes, 2 unlockable harder difficulties, 25 plus modes. Now, when I say it's a block-crunching puzzle game like nothing you've ever played before, I mean that. It's all about a unique resource management system. You take an individual block, you click it, and it breaks it forever, as well as a completely brand new device rotation mechanic. You take your device, you tilt it, twist it, and turn it, and that changes how gravity works. Now, not only do you get those really, really cool difficulties and challenge modes, plus modes, but also there are 300 built-in single-screen puzzles, handmade by our design team right in the game, as well as an online puzzle creation sharing tool. You can build your own puzzles and share them online with friends, and a free hand-designed daily puzzle brought to your device every single day. On top of all of that, there's up to 8-player online and local versus mode, online high-score leaderboards for every single mode, Zen mode for those who just want to sit back and relax, don't worry about lives, things like that, 200 in-game medals, over 40 individual accessibility options for differently abled players. All of it, no ads, no in-app purchases, and it's completely cross-platform as well. So you can, in theory, we're still working on on this with our publisher. In theory, you can battle people. If you're on the Switch, you can battle someone over on the Vita. Or, for instance, you make a high score. People on the Xbox One can see that if you're on the Vita. Or you can even say you're playing on the iPhone on the bus, coming home from work. You can save, quit, go home, continue right where you left up on the Switch. Then save and quit right there, go out into your patio, maybe start a barbecue, keep playing that same game right on the Vita.
That, I think, is the most polished pitch we've ever had in one of these indie dev interviews. That was fantastic. You covered everything.
I think about, as I'm giving it, I'm like, oh no, I've messed up several times, so I have to put things in the proper order, so.
No, that's fantastic. So, the first thing I want to touch on is this, kind of the defining thing of this game. And when I first approached the booth at PAX East and was handed a tablet to play this game on, at first I was kind of like, okay, well, we've got a little block crunching game. And then I was told, no, turn the tablet. And the fact that you have created this game where turning the tablet changes the gravity of the blocks is a fantastic mechanic. Where did it come from? Was it a mechanic that then the rest of the game was built around, or is it something that was introduced later? And what kind of challenges have you had in making this work?
Okay, so can I give a little history of the game?
Absolutely, yeah.
Help give this some context. So I started developing games along with some of the other members of my team back in 2005. We were just sort of like a little hobbyist group. We started calling ourselves Mind's Eye Games, but that lasted like 6 months, and then we became Wraith Games. This was all the way back in high school. One of the first games that I ended up doing, because very quickly I realized that all of my friends wanted to make games, but not too many of them really wanted to sit down and learn how to, unfortunately. That's the problem with being 16, We ended up I ended up making this little block crunching game for my mom. It was called Collapsus.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds familiar, crazy that. In 2006. And the thing was that I gave her this this game without anything. Like, I made it because I knew she liked puzzle games.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make something that I thought she'd like, just a little gift. In 2006, YouTube had not yet been purchased by Google. You couldn't really look at gameplay videos of stuff.
Sure.
So I was kind of trying to do like a whole Bejeweled kind of a thing, and had no clue what it was about at all. And so I'm like, Tetris. I like Tetris a lot. How would I do kind of a Tetris sort of thing, but in the Bejeweled framework? Sure. And I came up with this resource management mechanic. Mm-hmm. You click a thing, and then your resource goes down, and you make lines, and it comes back. I gave it to my mom, and she hated it. And keep in mind, I have two mothers. I reconnected with my birth mother a little later in life. Luckily, she was much kinder to the game when I showed her. But she'd not seen me in like well over a decade, so I think that had a little something to do with it. But my mom, the other mom that I made it for, she's like, it hurts my eyes, honey. It hurts my eyes. I can't play this. It's awful. Don't do it. I'm like, okay, Mom. I just want you to be proud of me, whatever. Well, when I first met my fiance a few years later, I was 18. Christy Iwema, who ended up being one of our programmers. She's a computer science major. I'm like, oh, you like video games. Well, I make video games.
Oh.
And she's like, well, what have you made? And all I could think was, we made, previous to this, what we call the 50 terrible prototypes. Mm. It was just us experimenting around and stuff, and Collapsus is one of those 50 terrible prototypes. And I'm thinking of like, which one of those awful games is the most polished? And it was only the most polished because I'd worked on it for my mom. Because we were just learning, we were just messing around. And so I give it to her, and she's like, wow, this is really good. And I'm like, no, it is not. Well, after she joined the team, we were picked up for one of our games, physics. We were picked up by GamePro Labs, which was the publishing arm of GamePro Magazine. And they picked, out of hundreds of thousands of submissions, they picked 10 developers to publish their games. They published exactly 2 of them, and then went bankrupt. Well, during this time, the rest of the team, and I'll try to make the rest of the story a little brief, but during this time, the rest of the team was like, okay, well, are we just going to keep working with physics, or what are we going to do? And I'm like, well, I've heard of this new engine that just came out called Unity. We should try to do stuff in Unity. And they're like, so port physics to Unity. Yeah! They're like, no, it is a huge game about gravity manipulation. What are we gonna do? And so Christy was like, let's cut our teeth on Collapsus. And the rest of the team, because at this point, most of my high school friends had sort of moved on with other things, except for my best friend and our business director, Thorne Penn. He was still there. But the rest of the team was like, what's Collapsus? And so she shows them Collapsus, and our programmer at the time, Jeff Clenenden, he looks at it and he's like, this could be something good. And I'm like, is everyone high? Like, what's going on? This is not a good game. You guys are crazy. You guys are sleep deprived. What's going on? And so they're like, well, it's not a good game now, but I mean, you've learned things. Why don't we take it back to the drawing board? So that's when we started adding a whole bunch of different content. Now, flash forward a little bit of time. One of those challenge modes involved the accelerometer, sort of moving it around and everything. And Jeff ended up leaving the team, but his code was able to be... We didn't use any of it, but we were able to take some of his ideas that he'd implemented and use them in a later revision. Mark Kalulin, which I'm probably butchering his last name, and he's going to hear this and then smack me when we get back to the studio. I can never pronounce his name, and everyone in the rest of the team's just like, "You're an idiot." I'm like, okay, fine. No, my brain just does not process names, so it's all colors and shapes. So he's like, this mechanic needs to be in the main game. And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, you don't put this in the main game, I stop working on it. and I'm like,
Ultimatum.
Fair point. It's in the main game. And the second we put it in the main game, all of a sudden, because we had been to one event with this game before, and people were like, oh, that's neat. And then we did this, and then immediately everyone's like, oh, what is this? And so at that point, we started winning awards, and we started going to more events, and people, we started, like, I think this is probably our 10th podcast appearance since we implemented that. We'd been on NPR a couple times, on Fox, talking about this stupid mechanic that I'm like, it's a great challenge, but it'll never
go anywhere.
I was very wrong. and I realized I was wrong, like, 2 weeks after he's like, no, it needs to go in the main game. And I'm like, but the purity of the mechanic. And then by the time he, like, implements it in full time, I'm like, I don't know how I was playing this the other way. Like,
no, it's a really fantastic mechanic that sets the game apart from the rest of anything I've ever seen in kind of the same genre. I think it kind of, if you'll excuse the pun, turns everything on its head. And
you are not the only one to use that pun. We've actually thrown it everywhere in our advertising that we can. I don't remember who said it first, but we're like, we're stealing that.
That's good. So the other thing I want to talk about, and this is I happen to really love puzzle games.
Yep.
It's kind of like my go-to genre. And one thing I always like, at least bringing up with designers of puzzle games, is how they approach making a puzzle, because it's one of the things that personally I find like so interesting to think, okay, it's hard enough for me to try to figure this out. How do you even go about building it? So when you're designing this system, how do you approach making it a challenge for people?
Okay, so that is a question that I actually have to take in 3 separate chunks. People who've seen me on other things, they'll know that I just talk forever. So I'm really sorry.
No. Talk away. It's good.
So the first was the core mechanic, and how do we facilitate the core mechanic? And one of the things that we realized, because you got to realize when Collapsus was first made, Candy Crush wasn't even a glimmer in King's eye. Bejeweled was Bejeweled 2 specifically was the big reigning one, but I took most of my inspiration from screenshots of Bejeweled, wondering how it worked, and then a mindset that was built around Tetris. I'm a huge Tetris fan. Well, I'm also a huge fan of Puzzle League. Tetris Attack, Panel de Pon, they're the same series. So we were trying to think about what to do, and then all of a sudden this giant monolith comes down, and it's Candy Crush. And I hate it. I hated Candy Crush when it came out, because what it does is it uses what are called Skinner box techniques. And for those who don't know, a Skinner box technique is a bit of psychological conditioning. It's the same psychological conditioning that slot machines use. What it does is it uses reward cycles and sort of near misses and things like that to condition you to want to pay real-world money. So kind of the generalized example of this would be like easy level, easy level, easy level, hard level. And because there's a bunch of flashing lights and sounds and level up and all these sort of things that make the pleasure centers of our brain light up, that's then saying, oh, no, I'm good at this game. I got to keep going. And
Right.
then you have to pay microtransactions and wait through ads and all that. We hate that. I hate that. Everyone hates that. So we didn't do it. What we did was when we start off the whole thing, the initial spawn is a fair spawn.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot spawn with a match.
Okay.
That's thing one. And it uses a very specific trick that I'm not going to give away.
Fair enough.
It's not even a trade secret. It's you will not notice the trick ever. However, if I tell you what the trick is, you will notice the trick.
Oh, that's no fun.
And you will never unsee it.
Right. No, don't give that away.
So it's one of those things where it makes the game a little less fun, but only on initial board spawn. So we have this initial board spawn system where it does that. But then for everything else, we have what's called the bag. Now, we stole the bag whole cloth from Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
Ours works a little differently, but that's where we started our idea. What the bag is in Tetris is one of each piece is put into a virtual bag. Each piece is then, like the whole bag is then shaken up, so all the pieces are randomized, and then one piece at a time, one tetromino, falls out of the bag.
Right.
The bag does not refill until every single piece is spent. That means in Tetris, you will always get one right-facing S, one left-facing S, one right-facing L, one left, completely. Now, then, when that's all done, the bag refills again with one of each piece, shakes up, moves on. Fair spawning. You are never screwed by their algorithm.
Right.
What we did is we have a lot more board to cover, and we also realized that a one-for-one bag is bad. So we have it where there's a number of pieces in the bag equal to the number of colors on the thing. So Easy has 4 colors. So there are 4 of each piece in the bag, and then one, what we call a sub-bag. The sub-bag contains all the power-ups.
Sure.
And the sub-bag rolls over to the next bag.
Gotcha.
So you'll get one of each power-up before the whole thing sort of refills itself. And then you get 4 of each color.
Gotcha.
That creates even color distribution. Now, the risk-reward resource management system, you have 10 lives, 10 breaks. Each time you make an individual break, that meter goes down. When the meter's all the way to the end, it's game over. But when you create a column or row of 4 or more, you get some of that meter back.
Right.
And it also pushes the level up meter, and the level up meter takes more and more breaks, more and more lines after each level. So then it just gets harder and harder to keep that up.
Right.
Now, that means that unlike something like Bejeweled or Candy Crush, where if you swap and it's not a correct match, it doesn't stay, like, it just completely undoes it. It's like, oh, nope, not a correct match, we're going to undo it. We allow players to reach. They can make strategic decisions about what they're clicking on. So that means that you have the bag system and that risk-reward resource management system, and those together mean the game is already fair. We then allow you to move the device in 4 different ways, which means that the opportunity for you to find a match is multiplied by 4.
Yeah.
So that design, sorry, I hope this isn't like really, really boring.
No, this is super interesting.
That design right there for the sort of main arcade style of game means that players are, as long as they're really keen in using their spatial reasoning and pattern recognition, able to find things, as long as they are willing to risk it for the biscuit, as one of our level designers would say. So yeah.
No, I think that's it's interesting you bring up the whole strategic outset, because that's one of the things I felt about the game when I started playing it, is there's this sense of planning ahead that you don't necessarily feel with other games like it. That's just really cool.
One of the neatest things about it too is the fact that you'll find beginner players, they'll click blocks right underneath where a match is. So you'll have a blue, a red, and then 2 blues, and then right above that red is another blue. They'll click that red. Advanced players, what they'll do is they'll go 4 or 5 blocks below it and say, that there's no greens anywhere near this green. I'm going to click this green and the entire column falls. And then within like 2 moves, they're using that red that a novice player would have otherwise gotten. And we call that the Christie method because that is the way that we didn't realize that was even a strategy until I observed Christie play it, my fiance and one of our programmers. She doesn't click anything that makes sense to human beings. She's just like, she clicks this and matches get made, and I'm like, why did you click that? And she's like, because it's not going to make a match anytime soon. And I'm like, yeah? You're right. To the point where when we were designing AI in multiplayer and for the hint system, we have to think about that. We have to, the more advanced enemy AI in the multiplayer, because you can put in bots at different difficulties. The more difficult bots are like, yep, that green's going to be useless for a while, gone. Like, because that's how real people think.
That's super cool.
So that was part 1, how we designed that. Part 2 was how we designed stuff in the challenge and plus modes. And I'm going to be honest with you, basically what we did originally was, okay, well, what would Tetris do? Like, how did Tetris make challenge modes? And we're like, okay, clear a certain number of things in a certain amount of time, stuff like that. Because when you look at a game like Collapsus, it plays completely different than Tetris, meaning it recontextualizes what that mode even means entirely. Then we're like, okay, what did some more obscure puzzle games, like import puzzle games and stuff, do? Okay, well, let's try something like that. And again, because it's Tetris, or because Collapsus is an entirely different experience, we can utilize some of those mechanics, and it's not even remotely the same. After that, we're like, let's just start just making stuff up. And so you have the 25 challenge modes and the 25 plus modes. Each plus mode is a more difficult version of that challenge mode. For each one of those, we probably scrapped 2 others because we're like, okay, well, let's see what happens if we tweak the game like this. And then we go in and tweak some mechanics and stuff in the code and be like, okay, well, what if every time you leveled up, it didn't replenish your block meter? And then we play that, and we're like, man, that's not good. Let's not do that. And then we're like, what if there were split color blocks that are one color on one side and one color on the other? And so we'd put that in and be like, man, that's really cool. And then we'd play it for like just hours upon hours upon hours. And we're like, yep, that's staying. And then we just move on to the next one. So I guess that then leads to the third chunk, which is the actual puzzle design. So Christie, even though she's a computer science major and she's a programmer for our other projects, she programmed Red Arkanoid, for instance, which is our previous game, because we have 2 other previously like actually released games. One was a web game on Congregate, and the other was a game we made for Game Jam for charity, which was Red Arkanoid. And then she's working on some other projects as well that we're doing in the future. But she is actually the person who's hand designing all the puzzles. Cool. And the reason I gave her that idea is because I'm like, hon, I can't play Collapsus like you. You got some sort of magic mojo that I can't replicate. And she's like, your high score is better than mine. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm clicking on colored blocks. You're actually thinking about board states? Like, that's not something I can do, even though I'm the lead designer of this project. And so she originally was just using graph paper. And she'd take it one step at a time and map her way out. And then when we finally got the puzzle tools for people to make their own puzzles, we gave that to her first before we put it in our weekly builds and said, okay, hon, here's the tools that everyone else is going to be using. Just use those. And she's like, this is great. I can just make puzzles on my tablet. I'm like, good, do that. We don't, no more graph paper. It's like, you have a stack like this thick. It's not okay. So that's what happened with that. And so her sort of methodology is Well, she has three different types of methodology, depending on what mood she's in. One is the most infuriating thing I've ever seen in my life, and luckily she doesn't do it all that often. She only does it when she's like, I've been up for 3 days and finals are tomorrow. I'm like, okay, do whatever you need to do. What she'll do is she'll take the block palette and just like put a bunch of blocks places. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I'm going to solve this board. Like, I'm like, that's not even a board to be solved. Like, what are you doing? She's like, I don't know, but if I figure it out, I'm publishing it. I'm like, okay. Like, and then she'll tweak it so it's solvable. And I'm like, what is that? And like, she'll hand it to me and I'm like, I'm not equipped for this. There's like 80 blocks on the screen, but it's only like a 20 by 10. It's only a 10 by 7 grid. How did you even do that? The thing is that like her second method is she will go and she'll do like meticulously like I'm going to place these here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to see how that sort of plays out. And she'll often spend like 2, 3, 4 hours on a single puzzle to get it perfect. Then the other method is something that I thought of, and she never thought of this. And I'm like, Puzzle League has puzzles, and Bejeweled has puzzles. At least it used to, and Bejeweled 2. And there are some Tetris puzzles in some of the versions of Tetris. I'm like, why don't you try to rebuild some of those? Yeah. Completely in Collapsus. And she's like, I can't do it. That's entirely different. And I'm like, it's inspiration. Yeah. And then so she'll pick it up and she'll like rebuild some stuff. And she's like, this is nothing like that. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be. Is it solvable? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, is it fun? Yeah. There you go. There you go. Because if we had managed to recreate the puzzle perfectly, our game would be their game, and there'd be no reason for us to make it.
Right, but using those older puzzles as a jumping off point, that's pretty darn smart.
So that's what she did with that. And so each puzzle mode has a different theme. And so vanilla is the first one, and it's just like no gravity, no weird blocks, nothing. Mm-hmm. And then you have like obsidian, and it brings in the stone blocks that have to be cleared at the bottom of the screen, stuff like that. And so each one of them, there are 5 puzzles in each difficulty tier. Mm-hmm. And so with easy, she's like, yep, I have completed 5 easy puzzles. Here you go. And I'm like, cool. And then by the time she gets to expert, she's just like, it's taken me 3 days to work on this one puzzle. And I'm like, I'm sorry, hon. But they follow the same difficulty curve as normal Collapsus. Easy only has the 4 colors, medium has the 5 colors, hard has the 6 colors, and then expert, what it does is half of them use mechanics from previous themes, and the other half use mechanics that are coming up in the next theme.
Oh, that's
yeah. And well, if you beat the last puzzle on hard, what it does is it unlocks all 5 expert puzzles, and then unlocks the first puzzle in easy of the next theme.
Gotcha.
So it's specifically saying, okay, you've beaten this, because you normally go one at a time, and then with expert, it's just like, here's your playground.
Right.
Play these expert puzzles. We have a system that we call interactions. So I've said no expert puzzle should ever take more than 10 interactions. And an interaction is a rotation of the screen or a push of a block, because players tend to be they lose engagement and also can't follow a puzzle if it's beyond 10 interactions.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. You reach a point of determination is beat out by frustration, so to speak. So,
exactly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And we didn't want players to be like, oh, this is a problem because I just have to click this and this and this, and I can't see the ending in my mind's eye. Instead, we're like, no, we're just going to do really tough puzzles that require the players to think in unique ways in under 10 moves. And with easy, it's like 3 moves or 4 moves. You don't go beyond that. And so it's like, okay, click this, done, yay, confetti. And then when you get to medium, you're like, oh, now it's harder.
Now it's a little bit more work.
Oh, no. And well, another thing too is each difficulty is not relative to each other. So like it's not like an easy obsidian and easy and easy vanilla are the same thing. It's relative to its category, meaning if you get to an easy obsidian, it's probably more like a really high-end medium vanilla. And so you get to some of the later themes. There's a theme called Mastermind. It's the last theme in the core game. Because we do free DLC, and it effectively doubles the content. We're doing a whole bunch of new puzzles and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. Again, it's free. We're taking the time to say, here's some new content. We're just going to give it to you. The thing is that like you go to Mastermind, and it's like, oh, this easy puzzle, easy one, is like hard on obsidian. What am I doing? So that's how she sort of approaches that. We also say that no puzzle should ever end in a way like puzzles should always end on like a break. Unless it's trying to teach you how the power-ups work, you don't end a puzzle on a power-up. It's not like oh, there's a burst block and it just happens to clear those random other blocks you didn't know what to do. That's unsatisfying. So we didn't do any of that. And we also we have a couple where it's solved by just rotating the device. You don't break a single thing. And those are the coolest things I've ever seen in my life. But there were literally only like 2 of them because Christy's like, I can't make these. So that's what we wanted to do, is we wanted to always keep people on their toes and just be like these are unique, interesting puzzles, but they all are cohesive with one.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's something you're achieving. You already talked a little bit about kind of the history of Collapsus and how your team got there. But I wondered if maybe you touched briefly on some of your inspirations and some of the games that growing up got you into the place where you decided you wanted to make games.
So those are 2 very distinct questions from each other. So I'll handle Collapsus first, and then I'll talk about what inspired me as a developer. Because I've been in the industry for over a decade now, and therefore I got a whole bunch of grumpy old man opinions. So we'll start with what inspired Collapsus. Obviously, Tetris.
Sure.
I'm an arcade collector, personally. Like, Christy and I collect arcades together. We're doing a physical arcade cabinet of Collapsus. We've done a physical arcade cabinet of Raid Arkanoid. And that was actually shown off at the Fitness Center for the Creative Arts. And
cool.
Also PandoraCon in Cincinnati. Oh, excuse me. So I love arcade cabinets. Tetris was the first game I ever played in the arcade. And it's funny because a lot of people are just like, Tetris was in the arcade? Yeah, actually it was. It was the Tengen version, which is Atari's version of Tetris, and it just sort of kind of changed my life. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my god, this is so good. And I was awful. I was like, I was so young and I was so bad at it, and it stuck with me. And when it got to the point where I was in middle school, we had an Apple II, for some reason, in the classroom, and there was a port of Tetris that was actually very similar to the Tengen port. I don't know if it was authorized. I have no clue. It probably was, but I played that so much, and that was just in middle school, and I just got better and better at Tetris. And then I finally found my one true Tetris love. Tetris the Grand... No, I'm kidding. Obviously not Tetris the Grandmaster. I am not a masochist. Which was Tetris DX on the Game Boy Color, just because I think it's the best version of Tetris before modern Tetris, before you get into a whole bunch of holds and a whole bunch of, like, rewards for T-spins and all sorts of stuff like that. Which I love. Don't get me wrong. For the longest time, I played competitively on Tetris Friends, and I now do Puyo Puyo Tetris, because if you're not playing Puyo Puyo Tetris, what are you doing? Like, it's it's so good. So I was really disappointed. It came out on the Wii, or the Wii U. Sorry, it came out on the Wii U, and I'm like, cool. I'm gonna wait like 2 months. It's gonna hit America.
Never.
I then had to wait for it to come out on the Switch, and I mean, to be honest, it was worth the wait. I got it as soon as it dropped, and everyone's like, "Why did you just pay $40 for Tetris?" And I'm like, "You don't understand. That's my game." But now it's become it's become a huge bestseller, and I think it's sort of brought puzzle games back into the mainstream eye, and it's certainly brought puzzle game awareness to the Switch. I mean, Lumines, another huge inspiration for Collapsus, is coming to the Switch in a couple months, and that would not have happened if not for Puyo Puyo Tetris. The developer of Lumines, they went bankrupt. And so they literally just made a new company just to bring it to the Switch. There's a reason for that.
Yeah,
I say Lumines is one of my big inspirations for Collapsus too. There's actually a mode in Collapsus called Detonator, and every time I tell people this, they're like, "What are you talking about?" And then I explain it, and they're like, "That's real weird, man." In Detonator, you click on individual blocks, and each time you click on a block, it doesn't break it, but your break meter goes down, and then you push a button, and it breaks them all at once, and everything falls. And that's how you make lines. And this started as a mode where we were trying to recreate Lumines in Collapsus. And we knew it wouldn't work from the very beginning. We're like, okay, so you click as many blocks as you can, and there's a scan line that comes down. And when the scan line hits the block, it blows up. And then Mark's like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What's going to control the speed of the scan line? That won't fit in our accessibility options. Like, what are we doing? How are we going to do leaderboards for that? And I'm like, just try it, man. And he couldn't, because every time he tried it, he's like, it's dumb. He's like, what if there's just a button and it just blows everything up? And I'm like, yeah. And so the thing is that you look at Detonator and you're like, how is this inspired by Lumines? But then you play it and you're like, oh, that's how. Like, it actually feels. Gotcha. It has that sort of Lumines feel, but it has nothing in common mechanically with Lumines. Then I played way too much Puzzle Fighter as well. It's another game that I'm just absolutely awful at. But I love Puzzle Fighter to death. Collapsus wouldn't have multiplayer if it wasn't for Puzzle Fighter, and that's saying something, because, like I said, I play a lot of Puzzle League and always have. It's surprising because, like, you're gonna hear some of my favorite games that inspired me. Most of them are not puzzle games. I am a puzzle game freak. However, I also played a lot of games in general. So.
That happens a lot with the devs we talk to. So it's by no means, it's good that people play a lot of different games.
Yeah. So the biggest one that surprises people is actually Rubik's Cubes.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah, because the whole tilt, twist, and turn mode was directly inspired by Rubik's Cubes.
Totally. I mean, it's a translation of 3D to a 2D platform, but it's the same idea.
Exactly. And the original art style, which looked very different. Eventually, we're going to be doing, once Collapsus releases, we're doing a live stream of us playing the original build on our Twitch channel. And it's going to be just a bunch of people not knowing how to play Collapsus all of a sudden. Because, like, people in the dev team, like, I don't know what I'm doing. Nothing rotates. But the original art style was actually inspired by Rubik's Cubes as well. It was very flat colors and stuff like that. The new art style, though, is inspired by Puzzle League, obviously, as well as pop art. You look at a lot of our merchandise and stuff, and you look at our advertising, and there's a bunch of, like, halftone dots on all of the Collapsus blocks, and that's because that was a huge inspiration. And because we have I'm the creative director, and then we have 2 art directors, a 2D art director and a 3D art director.
Mm-hmm.
I told our 3D art director this, and he's like, that is the single most pretentious thing you've ever said. And that is really saying something. He's like, how is that even remotely inspired by pop art? And then later, I was making the poster for Collapsus, and he looks at it, and he's like, oh my god. It really was. And I'm like...
I told you.
Yeah. Like, what did you think? And he's like, I thought you were just talking out your ass. Like, and I'm like, why would I do that? No, like, Andy Warhol is one of my favorite artists. Like, and it obviously it really helps. The simplistic art design helps with accessibility options.
Absolutely.
That's why we decided to stay with it. Because there was a couple opportunities where we're like, well, should we make it a little brighter and things. And every step of the way, I'm like, Tetris has a very good looking game, but it's not super flashy. Yeah. I don't think we need that. And then when we were integrating our accessibility options, that's when it was just like, well, KISS, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, that's what we did. Now, as for games that inspired me as a game developer, first big one was Super Mario World.
Fair enough, yeah.
We are going to be doing a platformer here in the future that is directly inspired by Mario World, Sonic 3, and Rystar, with a little bit of Klonoa mixed in. And it's an adorable little bunny cat who uses his ears that are hands for everything. But it's really cute. But he like flies
and terrifying.
No, trust. Like, we have the art. There were a couple where it's like, oh, that's some Uncanny Valley stuff. But no, he is thoroughly adorable at this point. Not terrifying at all. But the whole, there's a point where you can sort of get up speed and you fly around like with the Mario World cake.
Sure, yeah.
And we like to joke around the studio that it's the only game that I'm good at. Like, everyone else is actually good at video games, but I'm only good at Mario World. That's because I'm currently competing in the world record space for the fastest Mario World speedrun.
Wow, cool.
And I'm hoping some point in the near future to be finally done with that. So that way it can be like, oh, this new platformer that is inspired by Mario World is by the person who holds the Mario world record speedrun. And I'm like, yes, it is. This is something I've been competing in for quite a long time, and I'm this close. I'm actually, now that we have a Twitch channel, I'm going to be doing that a lot of just me going like, not even talking, just looking mad at the camera.
Face, yeah.
So that was one big one. Another would probably be, so going really old school, Jill of the Jungle on DOS. The original 2D platformer Duke Nukem.
Oh, yeah.
Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. And so those are the things where 9-year-old me told my mom, I'm making video games. And what she told me, remember, it was the same mom who made Collapsus. She's like, honey, that's not a career. You can't make money making video games. And me, 9-year-old me, is like, they gotta be making money somehow, right? Like, the
somebody bought them. Yeah.
Like, and she's like, no, you should be like an engineer or a doctor or something. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. So now, because we have breakfast quite often, and she's like, I don't understand your industry, but I'm really proud of you. And I'm like, finally. Whereas my other mom's just like, I knew you could make it. And I'm like, to be fair, we reintroduced ourselves because she had cancer, which is why she couldn't raise me. She got better. So the thing is that when she was reintroduced to my life, I'm like, to be fair, you've known me as a game developer, so you've seen sort of seen this,
right?
Yeah. But then I would say, moving on a little forward, when I actually started doing development, Cave Story was huge.
Yeah.
Just the idea of one guy doing all of that. It's one of my favorite games. Minor spoilers for two really old games. Curly Brace, her death in Cave Story, blows Aerith's death in Final Fantasy VII just out of the water. Like, I cried like a baby. And then you can actually save her. You know, you can't save Aerith. But so that was a big one. Portal, the original Portal, was a big one. It's actually really funny.
It's right there.
I'm one of the few people who actually owns a box PC copy of just Portal.
Not the orange box, yeah.
Orange box is up there, but also just I actually pre-ordered this.
Cool.
Because I saw a trailer for it, and I told Thorne, who's now our business director, I told him, like, this game changes everything. I was right.
You were right. Yeah, you can't really debate that.
Man, like, that's probably why my brain is stuck in spatial reasoning mode all the time.
It's all that Portal time. It's true.
Yeah.
Portal was one of those Psy games that was like, oh man, this is...
The industry was never the same.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, go ahead.
Minecraft was another one.
It's a huge one.
I'm really sad that Notch turned out to be some sort of, like, terrible person. I mean, that sucks.
It's funny. I was actually talking to a friend about Minecraft the other day, and it's a very different beast than what it was now.
Oh yeah.
It's become such a different thing, but it got me thinking back to, you know, playing that game when it was in alpha, and it really was. It was a game changer. It was one of those linchpin games.
And then finally, if I had to sort of say finally, and my Mortal Kombat cabinet is staring at me right there, so I should probably say Mortal Kombat, though it didn't really inspire me as much as I just had like a really good time playing it.
Yeah.
But that would be, wow, I had the game. Oh, there we go, Super Meat Boy.
Yeah.
And if you'll indulge me a little bit, I have a bit of a Super Meat Boy story.
Go ahead.
So I was a huge Super Meat Boy fan. I'd played the original Flash game, Meat Boy, to death. I beat it. I got all the achievements on Congregate, which were really tough. Beat the Meat Boy map pack on Congregate as well, which was even tougher. Was following development. Picked up Super Meat Boy like the day it came out. Then I got the autographed copy. I got the autographed soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
One day, I was on the Facebook page, and keep in mind, I'd been a developer at this point for 5 years, something like that. There's on the Facebook page, it's like, are there any actors in the Cincinnati area? And what a lot of people don't know about me is the fact that my field of study was acting.
Mm.
And so I actually have a pretty sizable acting resume. I've been in a few independent films, all horror films for some reason. People keep casting me in horror films. Also, I will say, probably, because I am a fan of horror, if I see an audition for a local horror film, I'll show up. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, you're going to take this...
show up.
You're going to take this to Sundance? You're going to lose, but let me in. Like... horror films do not do well at Sundance.
No.
But I'll act my butt off. So I arrive. The place where they want to meet is 15 minutes away from Christy's parents' house.
There you go.
And so I meet there, and it's Tommy Raffinis' sister directing this film. And I'm like, so what? I don't understand what's going on. And she's like, well, I went to college here. And Tommy let me post on the Facebook page because I'm looking for actors. And I give her my resume, and she's like, oh. And I'm like, I try. And she's like, you're the lead. And I'm like, don't I need to audition? And she's like, nope. So we go to the College of Mortuary Sciences in Cincinnati.
Oh.
which was her alma mater, and she's filming a zombie movie.
That's good.
And so, hence the it's always horror movies. I don't understand. And so we do this movie and everything, and she submits it to the festival scene, and it goes probably nowhere. I've not heard anything from it since. I've since watched it, and I'm like, man, I could have done better. And everyone's like, no, you're fine. And I'm like, sure. I got paid in Meat Boy merchandise.
There you go.
Signed Meat Boy merchandise, which is my favorite thing already. And then finally, because I explained to her, I'm like, yeah, I'm an indie dev. And she's like, if you ever have anything that you want my brother to see, just call me. And so
That's
in my
nice
in my phone,
That's a pretty nice connection to make.
So in my phone, I just have her number for the day when I need Tommy Rafinis to play something of mine, for me to be like, I need you to fall in love with this. Or if I'm like, I need you to tear this apart. One or the other, I have it right there. And that's so that was my crazy Meat Boy story.
That's a hilarious It's a Small World story right there. So to bring this to a conversation to a close, the one thing we ask every dev that we talk to is what other indie projects have kind of caught their eye, either that are just kind of coming out or are just kind of starting. So are there any indie teams or indie games that you kind of want to shout out as something that you're interested in?
I do, and this there's kind of a point, because we do a podcast ourselves, and there's kind of a point where it's like Jay plugs his friends. You probably played this at PAX, Wave Crash.
I did play Wave Crash at PAX. Really, really fun.
So Wave Crash is probably number one, up there in the top of my brain space. And then we've been to like 6 or 7 different events with the team who does Wave Crash, to the point where one of our programmers is like possibly the single biggest Wave Crash fan in the world. And so we've got to hang out with the team, and they are some awesome people, and the game is just so good. The next one would probably be Skeletak.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was weird. We didn't know. Dave Stanley did Skeletak. We didn't exactly know that they were going to be there, Dave, because we'd become friends online through a mutual friend who's also a podcaster. And so Skeletak is just one of the coolest, fantastic freaking games. Like,
it's been
my God,
joy to watch that game kind of evolve. We interviewed him kind of real early in development, and I'll have a link to that interview here if anybody watching this is interested. But yeah, it was great to finally meet in person. It was the first time we've met in person too. So
then there's No Mercy from Multivarious, which is another Ohio-based studio. They're up in Columbus, and that is a sexy game. Like the art is just so good. And they're really sort of putting the polishing touches on their programming. It is sharp. So those are probably the big 3 off the top of my head. That's, and there'll probably be some point where some of my dev friends are just like, dude, what about this? And I'll be like, oh my God, what about this? That would have been great.
That's good. There's no shortage of good indie games
I know.
to find. So it's kind of like asking almost an impossible question, but we always like to see what people are thinking about. Awesome. Well, Jay, thank you for talking to us about the history of Collapsus and kind of how it evolved, and the history of you and of Wraith Games. We will have links in the description below this interview to anything you could want to find about Collapsus. There's a demo version up on itch right now, so you can go kind of poke around with it in the kind of the PC version. So I would encourage you to spend some time playing that. And thank you, Jay, again, for taking the time.
Hey, like I said, anytime. It was awesome being on.